Hey there, my name is Jason Boswell. I'm the product manager of data discovery, part of the File Analysis Suite. And I wanted to give you an update here on the new release. The new release is version 3.3, and it's coming out in this month, September 2020. Um, this is our third release of the year. So we're trying to do releases every 3 or 4 months. So you'll be expecting a new release coming out towards the end of the calendar year as well. So what's new in File Analysis Suite Data Discovery 3.3? Now, the main theme of this release is to enable customers to do more data optimization. So we're concentrating on the data optimization use case. There are actually some other enhancements that we've done in the product that particularly to enhance the data privacy use case. But what we wanted to do is allow customers to look at containing the cost associated with managing this unstructured data. So to allow our file analysis capabilities to quickly enable you to identify that business data, we want to do this as quick as possible and as most cost efficient as possible. So to do that, we need to index the metadata first, then help the customer make some decisions using some data optimization rules, which I'll go into. So then once we've done the cleanup of the data, then we can then concentrate our efforts on analyzing the data privacy of the information that is left. So this is an important exercise to make the product much more valuable to the customers and get much faster results into the product. As we do this, it's a good opportunity for sales and partners to do more assessments. So we can, on short projects, you can quickly show the return on investment. Um, so this enables customers to perhaps analyze a small amount of data and then enable them to, based on that results, justify perhaps a larger project. So what the ability to index the metadata and some other enhancements within the product also sets us a foundation. So the releases sets out this broader motion. So in the future, near the end of the calendar year, we're also deep into planning of adding secure in place activities. So coming later, you'll see more the ability to not only find um, sensitive data according to data privacy, but enabling to take some protection activities via Smart Cipher and Azure Information Protection. We're also looking to use that ability to do metadata analysis to then start using sampling. So the ability to like you analyze the metadata of the whole repository, but then take samples to do deep content analysis. So we can do some sensitive data prediction. So again, giving faster time to value, faster results based on sampling. You also see we're working towards other ways of rights remediation, some integration with the file governance suite and redaction. So that's the general overview. Let's dive into some of the detail of the new enhancements. Now, I mentioned that we had a metadata index for data optimization. So there's a new feature. So as you create a new repository, there's a new option there available. And you can see that on the right-hand side here. We've got the ability to, when you create a new repository, to index the metadata. Okay, so given that we've now removed the option to actually do the collection at the repository creation because we're trying to encourage customers to now do that through workbook activities. Workbook activities are also the way that you move from metadata indexing to content indexing. So this is the default action. So it's a first stage that happens when items are ingested into the repository, and then you can make decisions afterwards about what the next stage of indexing you want to get to. As we have got these multiple stages of indexing, it's important that we present the kind of the latest stage across the repositories, either across all of the repositories or individual repositories. So there's a new data volume chart. So you can see an example of the data volume chart here. So we got the total number of documents that have been ingested and the ones that are at the different stages, metadata and the content, or we've fully collected them. So These are in addition to what we had previously, total documents and documents on hold. So as we do that, we'd also present this in terms of the metadata. So the ability, whether an item has been collected and its in enrichment status, we'd send that on an individual file basis. So you can use that for searching, and we'll talk about in a second. We also got new date fields so that because we've got different stages of induction, it's important that we have notify new date fields for the date it was modified, the date it was the record's created, the first and last date of processing of the fields. So this is really, like we said, this was to allow customers to clean very large repositories before detailed content scans in a much more cost and time efficient way. We've also added some feedback to the end user about the status of the indexing on an individual file level. So not all documents can be content indexed. So some files are either corrupt or protected. We're not maybe able to detect the file format. So in previous versions, there was just no warning. You just saw the text wasn't visible. So now we're trying to add some feedback. So that feedback is available in the details view screen on the right hand side here, and you can see an example of here's the files which were protected. So you'll see the details of, and these are 3 attachments that are part of it. Each of them have got protected files inside them. But you can also, if you perhaps index a repository and you want to find the ones that you're perhaps concerned of that are protected, and you want to take them through a particular process, then we can use the search criteria to identify the ones that have got particular errors or got particular warnings. So it allows customers to deal with where sensitive analysis was not possible for some reason, and customers want to identify, what risk is associated with these items, then they can take them through a separate process. Another new feature is our data process monitoring. Some activities, particularly ones that when we kind of creating or editing tags, or you creating a workbook for the first time or a workspace for the first time, a background activity is kicked off so to actually go through and do the tagging processing. So previously, and that the information about the progress of that activity wasn't immediately available. So we've got a new entry on the connect tile here. Just down the bottom, you'll see it here is the processing menu. And inside the processing menu, you can see all of the activities, background activities that are relied on data processing. And you can search for them based on the type, the status type or the status. Or you can then search for them by the user. So if I've kicked off some activities and I want to know when are those going to complete, then perhaps I can just search by my name and see the status of these items. So if previously you had to contact the hosting provider, Micro Focus, and to allow that information to be displayed. But now this information is available to you inside the user interface. A new feature that, as we've started to index metadata, what we've given the ability to do is display this information inside a grid view. Because if we just index in the metadata, on the right hand side, we'd usually have a preview view window. So as you're selecting down the items, you can see that preview window. So now if we just index a metadata, obviously there's nothing in that preview window, but you might want to see more information in terms of the metadata. So we display more of the metadata. So we've got more real estate here to display that. So we've added a grid view here. And so to allow customers to switch between the different views, we've got the grid view here, which is displayed here, and you see the icon on the top here shows that. But if you want to switch back to the the detailed view, which shows the previews. So perhaps you've got a mix of metadata and content index files. You might want to switch into that view here. Okay. Now, if you've just the system will automatically switch between those views based on the results sometimes, but then you can overwrite that with these icons at the top here. So this allows customers to display information in this metadata grid view, which helps them identify files, particularly if they're doing data cleanup or risk mitigation actions based on the metadata. Okay. Some more general user interface enhancements. We've got new inline icons to show whether a document has been enriched or content indexed. So in the list view here, we've got the item with the date and the title and the size. But on the right-hand side, and I've just blown this up so you can see it a little clearly, you can see the red dot shows that there's a weighting label being applied to a tag. So this is of a sensitive item. But you can the two icons next to it, and we've got the enrichment and the document shows the status that these documents have been enriched and these documents have been collected and content indexed. So these icons help you see the latest status. We've also got a new search based on document IDs. So I've got this search list here. So we've got search by date, search by extension. So, and this helps you if you just want to look for an individual file based on the document ID, particularly useful if you've got integrations with other applications and you might want to just check on a document based on its document ID. That can be particularly useful. The other user interface is that we were finding that what we wanted to do is give as much real estate to the application as possible. So this menu on the left-hand side that we have, what we've done is allowed it to be retractable. So when it's in retracted mode, we've got more space for the content and the analysis and the analytical views, but you can still navigate to the different views using the icons. Okay, so moving on to the connect section of the product. We continue to add more and more regions, and we've actually got more and more regions coming on soon. But what we want to do is help customers select the most appropriate region for that analysis. And sometimes this could be confusing for customers. It's important that we have country-based grammars, and we've got region-based grammars, and we've got worldwide-based grammars. And it's not appropriate to select the region ones and all of the country ones. That's not the most efficient way, and you're just going to have to wait longer for the search results. So to help customers pick the most appropriate ones, they can either select by region or they can select by country. So this grammar regions has been added. This user interface has been added to the new and edit repository screens to allow the customers to help them select the most appropriate grammars. For SharePoint Online repositories, we've added an option for the customers that use federated authentication. So there's a new checkbox here, and it sits as you register in a new repository. This checkbox will be available to you when you're using SharePoint Online to use federated authentications. We've also, then this was some feedback that we got through the early customers on the product, the ability to sort the term lists. So when you edit, this is particularly useful if you're taking in term list data from different sources. So you might have a term list from one particular source and you want to check whether I need to add a new term to the list, but you don't want to know whether the term is already in the list. And previously, this was just in the order that they were imported. So it's sometimes quite difficult to find a term in the list. So now we've added a sort to help you able to find them. Also, the charts and data presented on the data volume dashboard are now relative to the user's time zone. So if you've got customers in users in different time zones, and then the charts would make a lot more sense from a date point of view. Okay, moving on now into the Analyze section. We've added a collection status, enrichment status, and whether that has been sent to target in the filter panel in the search builder. So you've got these options in the filter section here. So it's useful if you're creating data processes through the workbook activities to you might want to find items that are in a particular status. So also it might be particularly useful if you might want to move them on to the next stage if you want to do more in-depth analysis. For the ones that are in the metadata analysis, you might want to set up a process to index the content of all those things. So then we need some filters to enable you to do that. We had some feedback on the data analysis dashboard that the trailing period, the ones where you selected on the data analysis dashboard, wasn't particularly useful, the slider. So we tried to make this a little bit more intuitive. So now you just define the period in terms of a number, and then you select whether it's days, weeks, months, years. And so you can see the trend in information based on your analysis in a much easier way. We've also added the option to create a workspace based on the selected documents instead of all the documents. So if you're going through doing some analysis and you found a selection of data that you want to take through a particular data process, what you can now do is if you can actually manually select the items that you want to put in this workspace rather than have to use the filters, and that's the only way you could use them. So now you've got both options here. So many of these things is what we've been listening to the customer feedback and respond to this, and we're trying out as many of these items in new releases as possible. Moving on to the manage section, one of the big new things is we've got a data cleanup workspace, and you can see the new template here in the new workspace templates. And this one allows the customers to identify and manage redundant, obsolete, and trivial data. So this relates to our data optimization theme of the product. So the ability to index a metadata and then put some processes in place to deal with that. Okay, so yeah, we got this uses new types of workbooks, which I'll talk to. So we had to do new workbook types to help you deal with this type of data. But what we want to do to enable customers to get an easy start on some of these data cleanup activities, what we did was we created a new template for them to get started. I mentioned these new workbook types. So previously we had just static and the query-based types. So now we've got static, query, dynamic, and task-based types, and you can see the different icons here. So the main difference really is static one is really the manually gathered ones, which we talked about previously. The query ones represents a set of items defined dependent on a search criteria, but this search is performed once at the time that the workbook is created. So if new items come into the repository that come into the index that meet this criteria after the workbook has been created, they won't be added to that list. Now, this is really important because we're going to take documents through a process, and we don't want the users to review and approve a set of actions, and then just before those actions are executed, new items come into this list. So it's important that the document set that the users approve to take risk mitigating actions, perhaps deleting some of that data, then we only delete the ones which are actually approved. So this is what this query-based workbook is designed for. If you want to use the dynamic query workbook, and that's the next one down here, the one with the orangey icon here, these are updated on an ongoing basis. So you can edit this criteria, but as new items come in, they will be added to this dynamic workbook. So the actual items in a dynamic workbook can fluctuate as things change, as the metadata changes, based on the query. The fourth item we need to add was the task-based workbook. And this was a specialist one, which is designed for deduplication. So looking for redundant type files. So this is similar to the static workbook, and you can manually add items to it. However, there's a special process, and you can see the icon here. And here what we do is we set the deduplication rules. So and the master rules. So basically, we say this is your master location, and any duplicates that you find in other repositories, they will represent them as duplicates and therefore suggest these ones that are cleaned up. So, for example, we might set Content Manager as our corporate repository, and if I find any documents that are in a cleanup location that are already in Content Manager, and the hash is the way that we represent that um, it's the duplication, so we know that it's an exact copy. Then you can it will be presented to be removed. So they can suggest that these things are removed. So we still go through a review process, but these ones that we suggest to be removed are duplicates from a master location. Okay, as we added some of these things, we need to do some new things with inside the user interface to represent that, because we've got the ability to do duplicate file checks. So we need the categories within inside the manager were all used to be called shared, and the shared means they used to be called duplicate. So duplicate means it is duplicated across the categories. So a file is in a couple of categories. And we called that a unique content. And unique content didn't seem appropriate. So what we've renamed unique content now to shared content across the categories. So if a document is in multiple categories, then this will be called shared content. And that's different to the duplicate files. We also need to create some new date pickers because we need some relative dates. So now when we're creating things like obsolete information, that's based on files that are perhaps older than 7 years. And so it's a relative date. So previously before you had to pick specific dates. So now you can pick in the analyze and manage section, you can pick before a particular date. So you don't have to select a before and after date. You just say anything before that particular date. And inside the manage section, when you're creating workbook templates, you can create a relative date, so older than 7 years. So when the workbook is created, it will calculate what today's date in and goes back 7 years from that. Okay, so these new kind of UI components make it easy to configure the criteria associated with these file analysis and auto classification workbooks. Okay, so as part of the manage section, we've got a new option in terms of the activities. So before we had collect, enrich, hold, center tag, and delete. But all documents had their content index. We didn't have a metadata option before. So now what we got the ability to do is if you just index the metadata and you want to then take a selection or perhaps all of the files within inside a particular workspace and index the content, you would select this item, and this will kick off a document indexing process. That document indexing process can then be monitored through the agent activities. We've also improved the tagging processing. So as we're dealing with higher volumes of data, particularly in metadata indexing, and we will use this process to index content and move between different indexing stages. What we've done is improve the tagging process. So this is a performance improvement. You should see a performance improvement in all of the tagging process operations. We've also added some enforcement restricting particular characters when you're selecting export locations. Just so that when you select an export location, particular file path, that it's a file path that makes sense. So we've also the bar charts. These are the bar charts on the right-hand side of the workspace overview page. We had some feedback from customers that Intuitively, you think you should be able to click on these bar charts and they'll take you to the items that are collected, items that are on hold, items that are exported. But these weren't clickable before. Now these are clickable and it'll send you through to the results. So once the value proposition, mainly particularly with this item here at the top, is that once the data cleanup is complete, it allows the customers to then move on to the next stage and index the selected files for detailed sensitive analysis. In the administration section, we've added a couple of changes. The first one is a new usage report, which is used for the customers to track their usage and compare it against the billing details. This product is based on a subscription billing, so you bill per month based on your usage of the product. So what we want to do is the information that is available that we use to actually calculate the billing, we now actually present back to the users, so the users can see their overall usage of the product. So where they can do a select to put the date criteria here and view the usage, and so therefore they'll be able to relate to their billing details. We've also added a new collect data permission for the manage and the workspace security. So as we added the ability to do in different indexing processes, so we're moving from metadata to content, it was important that we add a new permission to help control that. On the agent side, we've now removed support for Windows 2012 R2. So the current support for agents is Windows 2016 and 2019. And really, we've done this to align with the Microsoft end of support for the agent server. So we wanted to make sure that we're using the most efficient operating systems for the agent processes. So that's the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening. If you got any feedback, please send information via the community site or you can contact me directly. Thank you very much. Bye for now.